we're the ones that are saying, hey, let's pull this back, where others might be saying, let's add to it. And I think that's a good push and pull, right? We can understand the need to put more features in and add complexity to it. I think as long as we're being heard that adding this feature comes with a cost.
Hello and welcome to the Being an Engineer podcast. Today's guest is Bryant Foster, Vice President of Human Factors and User Experience at Research Collective. With a background in cognitive psychology and a passion for simplifying complex systems, Bryant has worked with companies like Google and other behemoths in the healthcare world to design safer, more intuitive products. His work spans everything from surgical systems to smart thermostats, all with the end user in mind. Bryant, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Aaron. It's nice to chat with you again.
Yeah, this is round 2 for Bryant. He was so great the first time. We just had to have him back. And his schedule is so busy, it took this long to get him here. But now we're here. Tell us a little bit about what drew you into human factors, right? That is your work, human factors, usability research. What was it that brought you to that field?
After I got my bachelor's degree, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I just spent a lot of time kind of looking at different options. And when I found user experience, I was drawn to it. It was this idea of, improving experiences. And I think back then, like going to Chipotle, and I always kind of liked how you kind of know where to go when you walk in, and there's some places you walk into and you don't know where to go. You're like, I won't call any out by name, but I'm thinking of one in Los Angeles I went to, and it's kind of hip and cool, and I felt like a real idiot walking in there because having never been there before, I didn't know where to go. And the people it almost kind of weeds you out, creates this exclusive feeling. But I don't think that's what I was drawn to, is designing things that are kind of usable by all people. And so I got interested in it. And it gave me an opportunity to be involved in design without an engineer, really being an engineer or designer or anything, because I don't have those types of chops. So getting to influence design and really focusing on making design useful and usable, without being the one to actually make it. And so, because I would have liked to have made it, but I just, that wasn't really what I knew how to do. So it gives me a chance to be involved in making things, and which I enjoy, and then especially kind of focusing on how people use them. That drew me in.
The Chipotle example is a great one. I think that probably makes sense for a lot of people out there. I'm curious, personally, I'm always looking at products mostly to look at how they were designed and how they were manufactured, and sometimes from the context of how would I improve this. But as a usability expert, I imagine you've got to be critiquing products left and right that you had no hand in developing, but that you're using on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's a bit of a curse of people, probably same for you in a lot of ways, and for us, I think the people we work with, we constantly are saying these types of things like, oh, how did they not think about this aspect? And I think I drive my family crazy, so I've tried to balance it out over the years and realize like there, and also too, I think I'm a bit more empathetic to the process of designing products, and I know how difficult it is. It's very easy for me to look at it through my lens, and as a consultant too, where I don't really have all of the complexity of the things that go into making a product. And so trying to realize, hey, you have to make sacrifices. You can't just have every single thing be perfect. But yeah, it is a thing we talk about all the time, about how could they miss that? How could they not? I know there's a specific example from something just recently, but I can't think of it right now. It's pretty consistent.
So when you're looking at a product and you're wondering to yourself, how did they miss this thing? This is an unfair question because there's no way that you can really know like why a team did or didn't do something. But do you have any theories, like general kind of high level theories about why design teams miss some of these usability features?
Yeah, I think when they're missed, it's often because the it wasn't put in front of the people who would use it early enough, um, and that can be for a number of reasons. I mean, it's not easy to get a prototype product, right? Something that's in development in front of end users. But, one example that comes to mind is for things that in medical space, like AI is huge, and especially in diagnostics, right, where there's pattern recognition involved. And so a lot of things are being used in imaging, and software is good at identifying patterns. And if we can train the software to say, hey, this is what cancer looks like, and it can be really good. But there's something involved in that where the clinicians who might be looking at these scans, they're accustomed to looking at them to identify the cancer, or in this case, cancer. Um, but now what we're asking them to do is not to identify cancer, but it's to say, is this identification correct? Have we identified it? And that's a bit of a shift. And so it seems like a really easy thing. Like, hey, we're making this easier for you. You no longer have to go and identify every instance. You now just have to tell us if the system has done it, right? That the software has identified it. But if that's not communicated clearly, it's confusing to them. And what they're used to doing over and over and over again, and this new thing that's supposed to be easier now became more difficult. And it would have been known, right? It wouldn't seem like it could be more difficult until you put it in front of them and you watch them and you're going, what? Okay, they're very trained. You've tried to communicate it clearly, but it didn't land somehow. And so I think we're seeing that some with AI and shifting how people are, what they're expected to do, right? You're changing what you want them to do. And it's hard for people who have years and years of training and experience doing it one way to now say, think of it differently.
Yeah. You've worked with very large companies and small companies as well. So the idea of putting a product in front of a user early, that makes intuitive sense, right? We're going to want to get user feedback quickly early on our products. Does the approach that you take to human factors, usability, does it change much depending on if you're working with like a giant, Fortune 500 company versus a small startup, or is it pretty much the same process across the board?
I mean, I think if it could be this same process as far as we're concerned with putting it in front of the user early and often, it would be the same for both. And the whole idea would be some kind of low cost, low stakes. And what I love to do is, if you have a system that has various components, it might have some software, some hardware, and maybe those things are not being developed all at the same time. Maybe it's easier to prototype on software first. Like, okay, well, let's take if we can prototype that quickly, let's get some of those questions answered. Did this the way we're thinking about how the software is designed and laid out? While hardware is working on other things, like let's evaluate that so we can check that off and not have to think about it again. So, whether that's a big company or small company, that really would be kind of the way that I think could be the most efficient, effective use of user, like having users involved in the evaluation of the product.
Let's talk about this idea of simplicity. I think intuitively, all of us want to use simple products, but how does Research Collective define simplicity? And when do you know if a product is simple enough?
From motors and robotics to controls, automation, and precision prototyping, Simutech brings ANSYS simulation tools and expert insight directly to your team. We help you accelerate design, reduce risk, and eliminate costly rework.
Validate before you fabricate. Simutech Group helps you simulate thermal stress, vibration, fluid flow, electronics cooling, electromagnetic performance, you name it.
Whether you're in automotive, aerospace, energy, industrial automation, or the next big thing, Simutech partners with innovators to deliver simulation-driven results that move products forward. Build smarter machines, launch stronger products, scale faster with Simutech's simulation support by your side.
Simutech Group, your engineering partner in motion. Visit simutechgroup.com and let's power up your next design.
Well, yeah, I mean, not everything needs to be simple, right? There are things that are complicated, and there's just no way around it. Complicated, surgical robots. There's so much involved in that. You're not going to take away so much that's not ever going to be complicated. But I guess, yeah, it's the idea of feature creep happens a lot with things, and people getting excited, like, oh, if we can add this additional feature, it could really help. But from our perspective, it's what can we take away from what's there. So there's a balance, right? And I think if we would say if there's nothing more that we would take away, then that's pretty good. I mean, that would be kind of an ideal situation. That would make it simple. Yeah, I don't know if I answered that quite right, but
no, I think you did.
We're the ones that are saying, hey, let's pull this back, where others might be saying, let's add to it. And I think that's a good push and pull, right? I think that's necessary, and we can understand the need to put more features in and add complexity to it. And I think as long as we're being heard that, hey, adding this feature comes with a cost, right? That can we live with that or not? I think that's kind of our role in that process.
I think that's a really important role, and a smart way to think about the user experience is what can we take away in favor of simplicity and user experience. Because engineering teams, I know generally speaking, we're thinking about what can we add. And I think most teams out there are similar. So to have a group like Research Collective that comes in and says, this is great, everything you guys done looks awesome. There are a couple of opportunities we see here to actually pull some of it back and make the experience even better for your users, your customers. So your team uses some pretty interesting tools like eye tracking and facial emotion analysis. I mean, it almost sounds like high-tech spy gear or, something of that nature. What kind of additional insights do you get from these the biometric results of these tools?
Sure. So, in the type of work we're doing, we're looking at, okay, we're trying to make things simpler, and you can evaluate whether something's easy to use by putting it in front of people. Like what I think people used to do might have been have people use it and then ask them, right? Like, what was that easy to use? You might have a scale, and then they could, give it a ranking on that scale of easy to difficult. And anyone who's done this may have experienced a frustration when you've seen someone use a product and struggle like crazy with it. And then you give them, that question after, like, how easy or difficult was it to use? And they mark easy, very easy. And then you're talking to them like, okay, what's going on here? Like, it didn't seem like it. And that can happen for any number of reasons, right? Like, by the time they're done using it, they don't necessarily want to say, oh, that was difficult to use. They might say, well, I just didn't understand it, but like, it's easy to use, which is fair. And so everyone has a kind of a different way of thinking of how to answer that question. So by adding biometrics, it gives you another way of looking at things like cognitive load. So through pupillometry, you can see kind of how much cognitive effort, how much effort people are putting into a process, and you can see that in real time. And so that might be another
Hold
way.
on. Pupillometry. I've never heard this word before. So you can measure the size of the pupil, and that's a reliable indicator of cognitive load or effort?
Effort, yes.
Huh.
So yeah, and so the whole idea is, if you're focused on something, your pupils will dilate, right? Because you're trying to get as much information as you can, and those are small changes, but the technology is good enough to sense these small changes, and it's happening very quickly. And another thing might be like returning if you're reading some text, and if we don't read linearly like this, right? But if you go back many, many times, that might be another indicator of like lack of comprehension, right? You're trying to understand it, and so you're having to look at it many times. And so these things can be added to that analysis of how easy or difficult something was to use. And so now if you've got the objective performance of them using it, plus some subjective things, and now you've got a bit more objective evidence through things like the biometric markers along the way.
As you're talking about this, it reminds me of that TV show House. Actually, I recently started rewatching it, so it's on my mind. Have you seen this show?
I've never seen it. No, I heard good things about it though.
It's a great show. Dr. Gregory House, and he's this world-renowned pathologist, and patients come in with unique, undiagnosable pathologies, and he and his team solve them, figure out what's going on. But anyway, one of the things that he always says about his patients is patients always lie. And I remember I was thinking about that as you were talking. How big of a problem is that for you? I mean, you're not dealing with patients per se, but users. How big of a problem is that users just don't give you honest feedback?
I'm actually really glad you bring this up, because this is kind of one of the things I love talking about. So, and this is, I guess, pretty deep in the weeds for human factors people, but I think what we're seeing in our industry is a desire. Well, and a lot of what we deal with is products that are seeking some sort of regulatory approval, right? A lot of people that are doing usability testing for like a 510(k) submission, and they're submitting that to FDA, and then the FDA will review their human factors, their usability testing results, and determine if the device can be used safely. And what we're seeing a lot is people really relying on the self-report that people are giving. So not necessarily was this easy to use, but in the case where, let's imagine someone needs to perform a task that has critical safety implications. If they don't do it correctly, they could hurt themselves or someone else. And if they don't do it as expected or intended, the process is to ask them, okay, can you tell me what happened here? And the only thing we know is that they didn't do what we wanted them to do, right? Like, what would have been the safe way of doing it? We know that because we observed that. But when we talk to them about it, they can say any number of things. And I think a lot of people are relying heavily on what they say about why. If someone says, oh, well, I didn't understand. Well, let's see. Let me think of a good one. I have used this other product, and it goes this way, and so I thought this one would be the same, but it wasn't. That to me, I think what people are looking for is some way of kind of not taking the blame of like that error, that misuse, and saying, oh, well, they had some other mental model, or they applying knowledge from one device or one thing to another would be like a negative transfer of training. So they have experience from one and they, do it the same way with this other one, but that's not the correct way of doing it. And I would argue that the device that we're evaluating needs to overcome, the person having a different mental model or having some other experience that, influences their use of the product. And so, yeah, people, and sometimes if you ask them enough, like, let's say someone doesn't know, like, oh, I don't know why I did that. The trend is to sometimes continue asking them, like, give me something to say, why this happened, like why you made this mistake. And eventually people will say something, and they might not be lying, but they might be, and they might be making something up, or they might be just saying something so that you stop asking them, why.
It's like torture, right? You keep torturing someone, eventually they're going to tell you something.
Exactly. And so, how reliable are those responses? And I guess my argument is how valuable are they? Because what we know is the design allowed this mistake to happen. First and foremost, we need to, understand if we can live with that. And the why, it's important, more in my opinion, more along the lines of like, okay, how would we design this out? So if someone says, oh, well, that button didn't look like a button, or I don't know, it looked like I was supposed to push it instead of pull it, right? Like, okay, maybe we can change the design. And that's the value of talking to people about why they did what they did, not necessarily to say, hey, is the design to blame for this? We know the design's to blame because the thing happened. And so any discussion we have should be centered around, how do we make the thing better? If there's a way to make it better. Sometimes there's not, right? Sometimes people make a mistake and, they don't know why. And you look at the design and you go, I don't know what else we can do with it. And that's okay. That can happen. Yeah, there's anyway, you got me on my soapbox about kind of people talking about why they make mistakes. And we just a lot of times don't know. And I think that the only thing we know is kind of what we're able to observe.
I love it. I can hear the passion in your voice. Are there any products out there that most of us know and you think are particularly well designed from a human factors user experience standpoint?
I mean, I'm happy that now that a lot of them are like a lot of products. I like to ride bikes and, I like any sort of, I got some lights recently, from a company called Nog, Knog. And they're definitely like an industrial design driven group. And, but everything from their packaging to, how you interact, they make a bell that I put on my mountain bike, and it's usable, like, and how to use it, but it doesn't look like any bell you've ever seen. It's just like this little ring. And that could be confusing, but just the way it was packaged, the simple instructions they had, made it really easy. So yeah, I think definitely user experience has gotten much better, with, I think Apple, made a big push on, user experience and simplifying things, taking away from design. Yeah, those are some things that come to mind.
Yeah. I think it was Mitt Romney that I heard this from. It wasn't directly from him. It was from someone who had been part of his company. What's his company? Bain, I think, the consulting company. And, as the story goes, I heard third hand, Mitt Romney was speaking to his company of consultants and said, hey, we are not, what was the word he used? Not pigeon, seagull. We are not seagull consultants where you fly in, crap all over everything, and then fly away. That's not how we operate. I thought of that because tangentially, I'm sure that's not what your team does either. Nevertheless, you are going to have to provide some critical feedback at times to your customers. And these teams of engineers and industrial designers, project managers, this is their baby, right? This product that they've designed and developed and birthed, it's their baby. How do you handle situations where like you need to provide some critical feedback that maybe not all of your baby, but this part of your baby is ugly?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge part, I think, of what we do, and I like that story. And yeah, I think the way we try to think about it is we don't want to provide a critique without a recommendation, right? Like, so not just it's easy to critique things, right? It's like, especially I feel like for people like us who chose to do this for a career. But yeah, we really try to say, okay, what's good about it, and that's maybe something we could even do better, because I think a lot of our, like, a usability study of a product is designed to determine if the device is usable, and if it's really designed to find problems. It's not designed to tell you everything that's great. And so then a lot of times our reports just kind of focus on problems, and really, I think we've done this better sometimes than others, but there are so many good things about the design, right? Like the majority of it is good, and so I think it's important to start with that. And some teams are more sensitive than others. Some teams are like, tell us everything that's bad, like that's why you're coming in, like you don't need to sugarcoat it. But others, yeah, it is their baby. I mean, there are people who their jobs are on the line. For a lot of times with some of the smaller companies, like it's all riding on this thing, being successful, making it to the market. So I think just remembering that, and it can be easy for us to, in our own little world, just look at problems, but remembering there's so much more to it, and the majority of the product is good. If we find issues, pointing those out as the minority of things that could be improved, and not just that they need to be improved, but saying, hey, here's some ways they can be improved, because I think that helps us become part of the solution rather than just pointing out the problem.
How can engineering teams be most cost effective when working with a human factors group like Research Collective? Or are there some best practices that they can follow so they give your team an opportunity to identify problems early and in a way that's less expensive to fix?
Sure. Yeah, there's an analysis called a heuristic evaluation that we do. And it's really kind of like an expert review, right? We see a lot of different types of products, and there's certain things that you just kind of know are good design, and these were developed originally by Jakob Nielsen, the 10 heuristics, and so we would evaluate a product to these principles. And so without any sort of user involvement, right? No evaluation where you bring people in and have them use the product, we can kind of just get some of that low-hanging fruit that we say. I'm trying to think of a good example of this from something recent. Even like some simple things, like some home use products that are designed to be really simple. Sometimes they're too simple, right? Like sometimes the instructions are too minimal that you go, I don't think people are going to get. One important thing about instructions is if you're going to give people instructions, like make sure you tell them each step, because if they are relying on those, which sometimes the battle is just getting them to look at the instructions, and if you win that battle and you get them the instructions, well, you definitely want the instructions to walk them through the process. And sometimes instructions can be a little too designy, if you will. They might be beautiful, but they are not kind of task by task, and so it might skip a thing or take for granted that it didn't communicate this one piece. And people, if they are kind of reading those literally, then they go from one thing to the next and they skip this thing. So those are the types of things that we might catch in a heuristic evaluation, because we would look at it and say, okay, what are the tasks? And if I'm doing this as someone who doesn't know, if I follow those instructions, would I get to the end result? And anyone can really do that, but it's just often not thought of, right? It's easy to overlook in all of the things that have to be done and created. So that's one way of kind of saving some money, because without bringing in participants, you're saving lots of money, not having to pay them, not having to have a space to do it. All those things would be cost savings.
Yeah, that's great. So your company's focus is healthcare, and especially in healthcare, safety is a huge issue, right? For good reason. What are some of the most critical factors? Because a lot of our audience, not all of them by any means, but a good chunk are in the medical device space. What are some of the most critical factors in ensuring medical devices are both safe and user friendly? Let's focus more on the safety aspect here. Are there kind of general rules of thumb?
Yeah, I feel like something that people are doing much better these days, or companies is establishing, and part of this is I think FDA, for example, has been better about communicating the need for something like a use-related risk analysis, and having that early rather than waiting too late in the process. And so essentially a use-related risk analysis it starts with a task analysis. So task, everything from maybe even purchasing a product, unpackaging it, setting it up, through use of it, disposal, every task that any user will have to perform, really being granular in listing out what those tasks are. And that might change, right? So sometimes what's hard for people is to think about doing that when the design isn't complete and the tasks might change. And I think that's okay, right? The idea would be for this to be a living document. And so as early as possible, create this task analysis and let it evolve, let it grow with the product and the design. And so the use-related risk analysis takes that task analysis and then assigns potential harm to any of those tasks that are not performed correctly or skipped, let's say. And that would, I think companies are very familiar with risk analysis, and in things like manufacturing and all different reasons how risk could get into to the patient or the user. And the use-related risk analysis would take from the big risk analysis and say, okay, if someone doesn't clean the skin before they put this thing on, what could go wrong, and then what is the severity of that harm if that happens, and that could be anything from negligible to serious harm, death. And that, so having that use-related risk analysis and understanding, it very clearly shows you where the serious harm is. That's what you really want to focus on, because if something leads to negligible harm, then no harm really, then that's more of a nice to have in terms of safety for your FDA submission. But if something could really hurt someone or worse, then those are the types of tasks that the FDA is going to be really keen on making sure that you have evaluated, and that the design of your product kind of mitigates those issues. And of course, the company themselves want to make sure that is not, those harms aren't being realized. And so having that early, you might be able to focus earlier in the prototyping phase on some of those critical tasks. So, if cleaning the skin isn't a really important thing, but let's say that holding an injection at a correct angle, let's say, is super important, then maybe you would design those instructions and evaluate those more critical task instructions earlier in the process to, again, we're trying to kind of put things to bed, like get things behind us. Hey, we know this design is good. We don't have to think about it again. We can keep moving forward with that design and focus on new things. And so if you have that list of what's really important, what's safety critical, kind of focusing on those tasks, making sure that you're communicating them correctly and people are understanding kind of how to do those tasks as early as you can. The last thing you want to do is get to the end and then realize, oh, people don't know the angle this thing's supposed to be held. We have to change the instructions, or we have to change the device because it can't be held at that angle based on the way it's shaped, right? Like things like that can happen. So having that use-related risk analysis early and letting it grow with the product, I think can really help.
In engineering, there's something called an FMEA. You heard of an FMEA?
Sure.
Okay. So
yeah.
It sounds like that's your analog to the FMEA.
Yeah. And sometimes it's people will talk about a use FMEA. And, I think what's cleared up more in the recent guidance documents for FDA is rather than starting with the hazards, starting with the tasks and then assigning hazards to misuse on tasks. And I think it's just kind of a slightly different way of thinking about it. Like from a use related perspective, I like thinking of here's all our tasks, regardless of any harm. Then we can look at, okay, if they're not done right, let's think about where harm can happen. And I think they kind of like sometimes a use related risk analysis might identify a potential harm that wasn't in an FMEA, right? Or so all these things kind of need to work together. Something represented here might identify a hole in something else, and then similarly, right? Like some harm in a FMEA might make us go, wait, we didn't even know that was possible, and maybe it's not from misuse, but needs to at least be considered.
Yeah. I hear people calling FMEAs FEMAs. It's just another way that people refer to the same thing, FEMA. And this is a stupid tangent. Doesn't matter at all. But it's always bugged me that people call it a FEMA. Like, how does FMEA spell FEMA, right? The letters aren't arranged that way, people.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, my engineering brain just can't let it go. FMEA. So you spent some time working at Google X, which is a prestigious place to be. Can you think of something you learned there that you have taken throughout your career?
Probably the biggest thing that I learned there. So that was the first place I worked after grad school, and I still had visions of being a designer at that point. I think it never really occurred to me that I would be a researcher fully, even though that's kind of what I went to school for. I always picture myself more involved in coming up with ideas and for design. And Google X had some incredible designers, and I just realized really quickly, okay, my role here is to be a researcher, and if I can provide good insights, those folks can make it look really cool and can actually make it happen, and so much faster than I can. So yeah, I think for kind of a younger, more inexperienced me, it was seeing how good people really are at their roles there, and then me realizing I got to be really good at this role, right? So where I design is research. Like I'm designing a study because you can do a study that doesn't answer questions that you might have had, right? So I think starting with good questions, saying, okay, we need to know, does this message clearly communicate this thing? And so how do we evaluate that in a realistic context? Because it'd be possible to, do a study and come out with results, but because the study was, not realistic enough, those results might not be reliable. And now when you put it into a more realistic study or in the real world, you don't get the same results. So that's kind of where I've found joy in being involved in the design process, is designing good studies that help answer questions that people can take and then build cool stuff with.
That story really resonates with me. finding these designers that were so good and made you realize, maybe that's not my calling. What I'm really good at is the research, and that's where I should focus. I've felt kind of my whole career like I'm never going to be the superstar engineer. I know superstar engineers, and that's not me. I'm good at certain areas for sure. I think I'm pretty darn good with mechanical design, but there are other areas, basically anything that is associated with electrical, not me. No programming, no software, not me at all. I'm not the guy who knows all the physics and the thermo and the statics and dynamics equations. I can get around Excel well enough, but I'm not a master Excel artist. And so over my career, I've come to accept the fact that I'm never going to be that superstar engineer, but you know what? I am very good at communication and organization and building culture and building community. In fact, I didn't realize how good I was at those things because they just came natural to me.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I realized, that's actually a skill that not everyone else has. And I'm pretty good at this. And so combining that, of course, I have a long background in engineering as well. And combining those two things has worked out well for me. But I think your point is a really good one. Identifying what you're not best at is maybe as important as identifying what you are best at.
Yeah, certainly for me. And I think, you probably don't give yourself enough credit, right? We do that a lot.
Probably.
We don't give ourselves enough credit. And it is hard to recognize what comes easy to us because you didn't think that you thought everyone could do that. It was like the things that you're good at. So, that's pretty cool.
Well, tell us a little bit about the process with working with a group like Research Collective. Probably some listeners are listening to this and thinking to themselves, man, we could really use some help from a team like Bryant's. What's the process for working with you and your team? The Product Development Expo, or PDX, is your chance to learn from subject matter experts providing practical, hands-on training for dozens of different engineering topics. GD&T, Advanced Surface Modeling, DFM, Plating and Finishing Techniques, Programming Robots, Adhesive Dispensing, Prototyping Tips and Tricks, and lots more. PDX happens October 21st and 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona. Learn more at pdexpo.engineer. That's pdexpo.engineer.
Yeah, it can really vary quite a lot. Just kind of an introduction call to kind of identify where people are at. Usually people are coming to us when they know they either want to design something new and they want to understand, okay, how should this thing be designed? And we can help do certain types of research to kind of look at maybe what people are doing currently and where there's opportunities to design something to fill a void. And then, of course, if they have some sort of prototype or some sort of product that they're developing and they want to know, is this usable? And then, they can contact us and talk, and we can, start with this heuristic evaluation or put it in front of some users in a small study. And every once in a while we get people contacting us who got pushback from FDA, and the FDA said we need to see the results from your usability testing, and then now they're looking for someone to help them do that, and we can certainly help in those situations as well.
How about for teams who, for whatever reason, aren't quite ready to engage with a team like yours, but they know that they need some kind of usability, some kind of UX research? Is there anything that, small things that non-experts can do to at least get the ball rolling in that direction?
Yeah. We're working with a group right now that that we're just helping them do a task analysis for their product. And maybe something they could do, but I don't think it's going to cost them. Well, I know it's not going to cost them all that much money to have us do it. And I think by, they're learning along the way, and maybe it's something that they in the future do themselves. But nothing's too small really. And I've talked to groups before where they want to get us involved in doing stuff. And then I might say, hey, I don't think now's the right time, right? Like, let's get you down the road on having some prototypes. And then at that point, we can evaluate them. And so, yeah, it kind of just depends, but it's probably never too early to at least have a conversation and kind of setting plans for when might be a good time to have something formal.
Cool. Nice. Okay. One more question and then we'll wrap things up here on this episode. Thinking back over your career, what is the project or the accomplishment that you're most proud of?
This doesn't necessarily have to do with any sort of project or anything, but I feel very fortunate to work with the people I work. And so the president of Research Collective is Dr. Russ Brannigan, and he was my grad school advisor. And when I, mentioned finding user experience with no background in it, he was kind enough to take a meeting with me and then, not tell me in that moment, like, you don't really have any background in this. He kind of said, well, here's some things you can do to get involved. Here's some classes I would take. And then, to work towards applying to the grad program. And, that got, now I'm here. Right. And so because he was willing to take that meeting, and then we worked together through grad school, and now over 10 years later, we're still working together. And so that probably is the coolest thing about it all. And now we have this great team, and we never knew kind of what this would be. And it's grown. We say organically, and we've pushed it, but at the same time, just kind of added people as we needed, and tried to always. A lot of times when we had people, it'd be like, well, we really can't see this person not being with us. So, I don't know if we have the work, but let's for sure have them, and we'll figure that out. And that, has I think worked well for us. And, so just working with the group that I work with it's nothing I've done, or it's not an accomplishment. So maybe it's not really an answer to your question, but I think it's kind of the biggest joy of what I'm able to do day to day.
Yeah. You're evaluating the products from all of your customers, and at the same time, you've been building your own product, so to speak.
Yeah. No, it's true. I'm very proud of the reputation we have in our field that has just kind of grown with us. And I think we get a lot of good feedback from people about just being flexible and easy to work with. I think a lot of times it is easy. It would be easier for us to be critics of products, right? It would be very easy for us to design studies, find problems, tell people what the problems are, and just kind of cut and dry, no emotion. But I feel like it's not something we necessarily would try to do. We're more naturally interested in being kind of partnering with people. And so, that requires us to be a little bit more flexible. Timelines change all the time. Goals change. People ask to throw things into studies at the last minute, and it would be much easier just to say, no, we've got this thing designed. This is how we're going to do it. But kind of accommodating those things has led to getting a lot of feedback of being easy to work with and being flexible. And I don't think we want to have it any other way.
how can people get a hold of you, whether it's to talk about engaging professionally on a project, or, maybe there's someone out there listening right now who is the Bryant Foster in waiting, right? Doesn't necessarily have that human factors background, but man, that sounds so cool. I'd love to get into that, and maybe Bryant can give me some advice. How should people get in touch with you?
So our website is research-collective.com. And my email and LinkedIn are on there. My email, Bryant at research-collective, Bryant, Bryant. Those are probably the best ways. And yeah, I certainly love talking to people, about various projects, but also people interested in the field. I think that's, I'd be very open to having those types of conversations.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Bryant, thank you again for appearing on the Being an Engineer podcast and sharing all about human factors and user experience and all the fun insights and stories that you've collected over your time at Research Collective and before. So really appreciate having you here, and thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aaron.
I'm Aaron Moncur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services, visit us at teampipeline.us. To join a vibrant community of engineers online, visit thewave.engineer. Thank you for listening.